Imagine waking up to headlines screaming, "America is broke, banks are collapsing, railroads are shutting down, and people are losing everything overnight." And then one man, a single banker, steps in. No government help, no central bank, just one man and his money. This is how J.P. Morgan saved America from total financial collapse, not once but twice. Before the Federal Reserve existed, before Washington had any real control over the markets, there was one man who practically ran American finance from his Manhattan office. A man feared by politicians, respected by bankers, and envied by the rich. His name was John Pierpont Morgan, and in the early 1900s, his word could make or break the economy. The first crisis hit in 1893. America was booming. Railroads stretched across the nation, factories were expanding, and investors were throwing money everywhere. But beneath that golden surface, something dark was brewing. Railroad companies, the lifeblood of America, were drowning in debt. Speculation had gone wild, stocks were inflated, gold reserves were vanishing, and soon the bubble burst. Banks began to fail. Railroad after railroad declared bankruptcy, and the New York Stock Exchange trembled. The U.S. Treasury's gold reserve dropped below a dangerous threshold, threatening the collapse of the dollar. President Grover Cleveland was desperate. The government was broke, so he turned to one man, J.P. Morgan. Morgan walked into the White House, calm and composed, cigar in hand. He told the president, "If you run out of gold, the entire country goes down." Then he offered a solution, a private bailout of $65 million in gold, raised from his network of bankers. Within days, Morgan restored confidence, markets stabilized, and for the first time in U.S. history, a private citizen saved the American economy. America didn't learn its lesson. 14 years later, in 1907, greed and panic struck again. It began with a failed attempt to corner the copper market. Within days, stock prices crashed, banks and trust companies began to fall like dominoes, and terrified people rushed to withdraw their money. Lines stretched around city blocks. Whispers spread, "Is this the end?" Once again, there was no Federal Reserve, no safety net, only one man with the power, connections, and sheer will to stop the bleeding, J.P. Morgan. At 70 years old, Morgan locked himself inside his library on Madison Avenue and gathered America's top bankers, forcing them to stay until a rescue plan was found. For 48 hours straight, they negotiated, argued, and pledged millions. Morgan personally decided which banks would survive and which would fail, even using his own fortune to keep the New York Stock Exchange open. By dawn, the panic was over, the market survived, and once again, J.P. Morgan had saved America. But his actions came with a price. The public began to question, should one man have this much power? He was called a hero and a dictator. Some saw him as a savior, others as a tyrant in a top hat. The events of 1907 shook Washington so deeply that 6 years later, in 1913, the Federal Reserve System was created to ensure that no single person could ever control the U.S. economy. Ironically, J.P. Morgan's immense power led to the creation of the very system that replaced him. He wasn't a president, a general, or a politician, yet twice he saved the United States with nothing but faith, gold, and sheer willpower. Love stories where money, power, and history collide? Hit subscribe, because next time we'll uncover how a secret meeting on Jekyll Island created the Federal Reserve itself.